Hey everyone, this is Mike with 4 and 6 Music. For today's lesson, we're going to go over how to transition between chords smoothly. So I'm going to give you guys two chord progressions, one in which we can transition a little bit smoother than the second one. And I'm going to show you guys how to make it a little bit easy when going from chord to chord, because especially when you're starting off as a beginner, that can be a very, very difficult thing, is just going from one chord to the next. A lot of times when I see students doing this, especially when they're first starting out, a lot of times the tendency is to lift up the whole hand, all the fingers simultaneously, and then go back to the fretboard. That is not what you want to do. And you're going to notice that with every single chord transition, even if I'm lifting up all my fingers from the neck, I'm still going to keep my fingers hovering very close to the fretboard like this. I'm not going to lift them up like that, which I sometimes see. I know it looks excessive and dramatic, but honestly, that's what I see with some of my students when they're transitioning from one chord to the next. Don't do that. Try to keep your fingers as close as possible to the neck when you're transitioning from one chord to the next. So let's start with our first chord progression. So like I said, I'm going to give you guys two chord progressions to practice this. Our first chord progression is a very common chord progression in the key of C, starting with our C chord. So we have our C, then we go to A minor, then D minor, then G7, and then we go back to C. So if you notice with my hands, on my left hand over here, when I transition from one chord to the next, I kept my fingers very close to the fretboard, as I told you guys in the beginning of the video. But also, when it came to transitioning between certain chords, I didn't really lift up my finger from the some of the strings. So let's talk about C to A minor, our first chord transition in this progression. So for this, we have our one chord, our C, and then we go to our 6 minor, which is A minor. So when you're doing this and you're making that transition, all you have to do is move your ring finger, the third finger, from the 3rd fret on the 5th string to the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, yes. The 2nd fret on the 3rd string. So I'm only moving that one finger. My 2nd finger and my 1st finger stay in place for that chord transition. That's a very, very smooth transition, only having to move one finger. You're not always going to have that, but whenever you do that. Don't move your finger if you don't have to when you're going from one chord to the next. That's super important, right? And you're going to notice that with some chords, you're able to do that. Not with all of them, though, just like what we have with our next chord transition in the progression, going from our A minor, our 6 minor, to our D minor, our 2 minor chord. So when we make that transition, we have to lift up all of our fingers and we bring them down one string, and then we also move over one fret with our ring finger. So with our first finger, we're moving that down one string, we're still on the same fret. With our second finger, we're moving it down one string, we're still on the same fret. And then with our third finger, we're moving it down one string, but also over one fret from the 2nd to the 3rd fret. And then we play the first 4 strings. So for this chord, even though we are going from A minor to D minor and moving all of our fingers off of the strings, again, you don't want to do this. That's unnecessary movement. Again, don't unnecessarily move your fingers off of the fretboard like that when transitioning from one chord to the next. And also, just like I exemplified with the A minor going to D minor, make your finger movements as minimal as possible, even if you have to move all of your fingers. And then going from our D minor to our G7, our 2 minor to 5-7 chord, we're going to move our 2nd and 3rd finger, but we're going to leave our 1st finger anchored on the 1st fret of our 1st string. So it looks like that. So again, going from our D minor to G7, just like that. And if you notice with my fingers, again, I had to move both of these fingers down. So when I say down, I mean sound-wise, not geographic-wise. So down from the with our second finger, still staying in that same fret, the second fret, but moving from the third string to the fifth string. And then same thing with the third finger, still on the same fret, the third fret, but moving from the second string to the sixth string. So also notice what frets you're going to as well, or whether you're staying on the same fret or not, so that when you're moving down or up on the neck, you only have to move like that. You don't have to, again, do something like that where your fingers are wandering all over the place. You don't want wandering fingers when going from one chord to the next. Just make sure, again, minimal movements, just like that. And then we go from the G7 to our C chord, our 5-7 to 1. Nice resolution over there. And for this, we have to move all of our fingers. But the nice thing about this is that we move these two fingers down one string or up one string. And then we move this down one string. So we go with our first finger from the first string to the second string, from the second and with the second and third finger, from the fifth and sixth string to the fourth and fifth string, respectively. So it sounds and looks like that. So again, that chord progression with our smooth chord transitions. And if that's difficult for you guys, if this is something that you're attempting for the first time, my suggestion is just pick two chords and go between them. So, for example, going between the C and the A minor, and then back to the C and back to A minor, and just keep doing that until your fingers get comfortable with that transition. Once you get that, then go between, again, two chords, so our A minor to D minor. Back and forth, just like that. And even when you're first starting out, I get that you're going to be looking down at your left hand. Once you get used to that transition between the chords, try doing that without looking at your left hand, right? Just look straight forward, or as I'm doing, looking towards the camera. It's easy for me doing this because I don't have to look down at my hand. But when you're making that transition, again, I know you're going to be looking down at your left hand a lot as a beginner. Try to get used to not looking down at your left hand, right? Because you're not always going to have that that luxury of looking down at your hand and being able to see what you're doing. There are some performances that I've been in where I couldn't really see my hand too well. So I had to rely, again, just on not looking, but on hearing what I was doing. So you want to get used to that as much as possible. Again, I get you're going to be looking down at your left hand, especially if you're skipping from like one fret to another and you're jumping up the neck like that, and you want to get it accurate and consistently accurate. I get you're going to have to look down at your left hand, but definitely get used to not doing that, right? Because again, you're not always going to have that luxury. So that's our first chord progression. Our second chord progression is pretty different. We're going to be migrating over from the key of C to the key of D. And for this one, we have only 3 chords this time. We have our D major, our 1 chord, because again, we're in the key of D this time, so that's going to be our new 1. Then we go to our G chord, our 4 chord, then our A, our 5 chord, back to our D, our 1 chord. Now, when you're doing this, if you notice my left hand, I did not keep any fingers on the strings whatsoever. When I'm going between all 3 of these chords, I have to change all the fingers, just like that, going from D to G. For this G chord, I'm using the 4-finger G chord, but you can also use the 3-finger G chord as well with the B, the open B string, rather than the D on the B string. Again, I mentioned this before, for me personally, I prefer this G chord, but this G chord works as well. So when you're going between, actually, scratch that. Did not even notice. So again, it's something that you have to think about. I didn't even really think about that when I went from the D to the G chord. If you do the 4-finger G chord, you can keep your 3rd finger down on that D on the B string, just like that, right? If you play the 3-finger G chord then you're going to have to move that 3rd finger down 1 string, or up 1 string, I should say. Just like that. So it depends on which G chord you use as far as how your finger is going to move from one chord to the next. But the most important thing is minimizing the movement. So don't go from like one chord to the next like that, where you're lifting your whole hand out and going really far from the fretboard. Don't do that. That's unnecessary, and it's going to take so much longer to go from one chord to the next. So again, keeping the 3rd finger there. Should have known that before. And then after the G, we go to our A chord, our 5 chord. And for this one, we have to change all of our fingers. But if you notice too, when I do this, I move all the fingers simultaneously like that. I'm not going 1 finger at a time like this. Initially, you might be doing that when you're going from one chord to the next because your fingers are not used to doing that. But as you get used to this, you should be moving your fingers simultaneously like that, rather than, again, 1 finger at a time, because that's going to take much longer, and it's, especially if you're playing a chord progression where you have to go from one chord to the next pretty fast. It's going to be a lot more difficult to get nice and smooth if you're doing this. Right? It's just not going to work. So you want to make sure you're moving all your fingers simultaneously at the same time. And then from our A, our 5 chord, to our 1 chord, the D major. Just like that. So that's how you would transition from one chord to the next smoothly. Those are some tips and tricks for you guys to help you out, especially if you're a beginner. I get this is going to be very difficult for some of you guys. Some of you might pick this up very quickly, but I've had students both who pick this concept and this idea up very quickly, and others who take a little bit longer for them to actually get it in their fingers. Conceptually, they understand it. It's just physically, they can't really do what they know they have to do, right? And when you're playing an instrument for the first time, that's what it is. You're just kind of making your fingers work in the way that your mind understands what it should be doing, right? So again, those are some tips and tricks for you guys for transitioning from one chord to the next smoothly with those 2 chord progressions. So definitely practice those if you're not used to that, and take the tips and tricks that I gave to you guys in this video and really work with that while you're practicing. And I promise that when you transition from one chord to the next, it's going to be so much easier than, again, if you're just lifting up your whole hand from the fretboard, or if you're going from one chord to the next and laying down 1 finger at a time. You don't want to do that. It's going to take so much longer than it has to. So I hope that helps you guys out. If you have any questions, you can leave a question in the comment box. If you would like to book a lesson with me at Michael D. Javine at 4 and 6 Music, you can fill out a booking form in the description box below, and I'll get back to you within 24 hours. So until the next video, I'll see you guys then. Rock and roll.